Welcome to the first Second Saturday Artist Talk in a very long time. I'm beyond excited about this, and I'm here at the new Aggregate Space Gallery, which has not been technically open to the public really at all yet. And I'm in the lower gallery, so there's two galleries at our new space, and in the upstairs gallery, the very first show that we've had in this space is our 8th annual video open call. And I couldn't be happier to be here chatting with many of the artists from that exhibition. And Willis is behind the scenes trying to direct the YouTube, Zoom YouTube conversation, while I'm doing my best to just maintain engagement. And I'll start the conversation and we'll moderate it and I'll introduce all of you. But first, we're gonna go take a look at the show. So again, we're on untested ground here. So I'm gonna log in with my phone and I'm gonna walk you through the exhibition. Some of you guys have never seen it before. So this will be a nice little first treat. And then we'll come back and we'll talk. So here we go. We're gonna try to do this. It's showing me currently. All right, so let's see if I can switch the camera. Okay, so there's Willis behind the scenes. And there's our little setup. Okay, so welcome to, this is where we are right now, the 8th annual International Video. Well, that was a fun experiment. Let's hope it plays. Okay, so I would love to introduce some of the artists from Video Open Call 8. I think I know most of you by face, which is super exciting, and oh, I have your names there too. So let's just start with Alexandre Alagôa.
Hey, hey everyone! Really happy to be here among you. Yeah, I'm Alex. My piece is Grid. It's really, I mean, I'm really happy to be here for the opportunity and to meet you all. I mean, it's still a weird time, but I think we are getting better. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Alex, that's great. That's neat. And how about Allyson and Jesse?
Hello, I'm Allyson.
I'm Jesse.
Joining you from Denton, Texas today. And yeah, really happy to be here and get to get a little tour of the gallery. It's wonderful, thanks.
How about Anna?
Hey everyone, hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm Anna and my piece is White Noise. And I've actually gotten to see the show twice because I'm local, but I'm coming to you from New York right now where I'm getting a ton of other art experiences. So happy to be here, 3 hours ahead.
How about Ellie?
Hello, I'm Ellie. I'm a Korean artist currently based in London. I'm pleased to join this exhibition. Thank you for inviting me, and then thank you for this great opportunity.
Fantastic. How about Mia?
Hi everyone, I'm Mia. I'm also coming from the East Coast in Washington, D.C. And I feel really honored to be here and among all of you. And yeah, it's just amazing. I haven't seen the show or the gallery, so it was amazing to get a little tour. I want to be there so badly.
We'll capture it with good video and photo documentation this week. And I think I might do another live stream event, just like you're standing in the corner. We've done that in the past, but I might do it on the closing reception. I guess finally our last guest, so we might be joined a little bit later by a couple of people that said that they were traveling during the beginning of this and are hoping to get the place to join by phone. So we'll see if they get in. Willis will keep her eye out. But until then, let's see our last visitors, Carey and Gabriel.
Hi. And Weston is here too. This is Baby's first artist talk.
He's in the piece, so.
It's true.
His heartbeat's in the piece.
But yeah, we're very happy to be here, and it was very cool to see a little teaser of the gallery. Hope we get a chance to go and look at the pieces.
I love your shirt. Shapeshifter Cinema is another Oakland survivor of the pandemic. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about what the Video Open Call is, and I think most of you guys know what the process is. And again, I really appreciate your applications. We had many dozens of applications this year. But really, the design was always to have an exhibition that was about the moment. And you know, originally we would have a 2-week deadline and just say, send something new, send whatever you have. We're going to build a show out of the best stuff. And so we do a blind rating of the videos as they come in. And so we don't know who anyone is. I restrict the spreadsheet so that you only can see the link, the password to the piece, and you can't see what the other people, the other jurors are rating it. And so we just rate all the works, and then I take an average of those ratings, and we try to rate them based on integrity, not anything beyond. Just, is it accomplishing what it's attempting to, and is it cohesive with its content and its aesthetics. And so we sort stuff and we see what bubbles to the top, and consistently the top 5 or 6 pieces always every year have a very noticeable connection. And of course this year would be a little bit more obvious because new work right now was largely being made during lockdown of many different ways. But I think what was interesting about this year is how the work wasn't about the pandemic. It was about how the world was being exists now. With the exception perhaps of Alex's piece. But all of the work had this odd sterilization of place and this disruption. And I would love to hear from each of you kind of as the first point of discussion. And again, we can go around the room. I'm not sure. Let's try to do this without hand raising, and we'll just chime in. Or maybe if you raise your hand, I can see that. So just visibly, if whoever wants to go first. But I'd love to just hear about how you feel that the piece that you made for this exhibition was influenced by your experiences in this new paradigm that we all had to deal with in the middle of last year, in the beginning of last year. And, does anybody want to kind of address that thought? Allyson.
Yeah, it was interesting. We started our work on this piece, I guess, right around the time lockdown began. And I think a lot of the themes addressed were things that we were already thinking about, and then kind of got compounded by this collective experience we were having. One thing that really comes to mind for me as well, and I don't know, Jesse, if you have further thoughts on this, but a lot of just our access to some of the spaces, some of the sort of outdoor architectural spaces that we used in our piece, I think was made a lot easier by this. We live close to Dallas, and by this sort of like urban space being vacated during this time, and us being able to go around and shoot things and get these sort of beautiful architectural spots or shots in spaces that would normally be much more populated was weirdly helpful. And a nice activity to do, to be able to get outside the house and kind of have a reason to like be experiencing these places during this time.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add really quickly that I think the experience of making it also kind of mirrored, I don't know, a lot of our mentality, where the piece incorporates footage shot in the real world into sort of a computer desktop space. And so we spent a lot of time going out and collecting the footage in the world, which felt like a really great way of kind of getting outside of the computer, getting outside of the house when we were all kind of doing that, I think, really intensely. And but then the piece also required a lot of editing. And so it also demanded that we kind of continue to stay inside to work on it. Mm-hmm. So it kind of pulled at both of our, I don't know, both of the poles of existence. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, it comes through in the work. And there's something about your piece that feels very like you created something that talks about like the video art's presence during the pandemic, and I think a lot of people that come to this space are specifically people that teach video or active video artists, and the fact that your voice largely narrates the entirety of the exhibition. So there's kind of not a spot that you're standing where you don't hear it a little bit, unless you're involved with one of the pieces with headphones. And so it leads into these moments that overlap between the pieces that have you talking about the history of lens, talking about perspective, talking about speaking to students, talking about surprise and experience and the oddities of what just happened. But then the video itself is kind of walking you through this kind of rather mundane, although like beautifully orchestrated desktop experience of that we're all stuck in. And so, it became this really wonderful choice for the exhibition to have your voice not only narrating this very enclosed environment that you presented, but also starting to narrate works that existed out in the world a little bit more directly than your piece is speaking to. And it just gave us this really interesting opportunity to again have this voice narrating the exhibition. So thanks so much. Gabriel, you want to chime in?
Sure.
Sorry we haven't seen anybody's pieces yet, but from what you guys are describing about your process, we also had similar kind of just noticing certain types of, urban spaces were completely vacated. And it was really interesting because while we were working on this piece, I was pregnant during the pandemic and we were kind of taking all these walks in our neighborhood in San Francisco and noticing that, a lot of people were still in parks, but the playgrounds were all closed. So they would be these kind of little isolated areas that were completely empty, surrounded by kind of people trying to kind of piece together some sense of normalcy around it, And also there's just this like in San Francisco, I'm sure in other places too, you're not allowed to go into a playground unless you have a kid with you. And so as we don't have any other children, we've never really gone into the playground spaces before. And so we were kind of looking at them, I was oh, in the future, we could go in there, and right now, nobody can go in there. And it's super weird to see a playground completely deserted because in SF, it's they're always totally full and super just really lively places. And it was really
it was sort of the only opportunity that you could have to film a playground without being creepy.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
there's no kids in it,
Exactly. Yeah. Even though it was sad that nobody could use the playgrounds, it's just it was a really great opportunity too. But
I think it also opened up, I don't know, it led to a lot of things that we imagined at that point, what would fill this empty space and what we could imagine sort of taking the place of people in these spaces.
Yeah. And did you want to say anything about the sound?
No.
No? Oh, okay. Okay.
We'll come back around to that. I mean, I think the your piece has this playful quality, but is because of its content is so somber, and it's so again you're placing the piece around this lost space attitude, which again I think is something that a lot of people have been thinking about during the pandemic, and especially people that are using their homes in a different way. Or I feel in the Bay Area they did this street closure thing, which turned many streets into exercise areas. So they in Oakland they closed 20% of the suburban streets to traffic unless you live on the street, and so they created all these these urban jogging trails, which feels very peculiar. And I just think that you guys did it in such a fun and exciting way, which a lot of it was the sound, which we'll swing back around. I mean, I think sound plays a major role in the majority of these pieces of work. Does anybody else want to kind of chime in about space? I mean, I think Mia and Anna both could kind of continue the thread of re-examining both the computer and virtual workspace and how that kind of ties into our visual experience, especially during the pandemic. Yeah, go ahead, Anna.
I went a different direction with mine, and I found myself limited to just my tiny apartment. So I created a new world and just kind of expanded, and by going on the inside, and I created multiple selves, and I populated an entire world in AR where I had different rooms and make believe buildings and things like that. So it was really exciting to just fully go inward. It was still really playful, a little dark. I think, I don't know if anyone's seen it or heard the audio from it, but asking all manner of existential questions and wondering, how much worse it can get and where it could possibly go. So definitely went inward, but somehow in an expansive way. So nothing to do with the reality of what was going on, aside from the fact that I couldn't go outside.
I think that speaks to the scenario, right? I mean, you created this. Anna's piece was what I started with and ended with at the very top of the stairs. And it exists of kind of a voyeuristic looking through windows of an adjacent apartment building, and then you slowly realize that every person in each room of each apartment is the same performer, which is also the filmmaker, which is Anna. And I think that there's relationships to Roberta Brightmore, Lynn Hirschman, Avatar, and I think there's relationships to Hitchcock, most certainly. And I think people really kind of dig in. I think it's the shortest piece in the exhibition, but it's so dense with action and like movement of character that people return to it at the beginning and the end. It seemed like a really good choice, I think, for us, because we have this weird space at the top of the stairs that used to be a box office to the space, and has this weird window. And so the idea of kind of this piece that is, it overtly ends with the closing of a window, or the backing the camera out through a window. So we kind of thought it would be a funny choice to put in a space that you were actually looking through a window to see the piece. But the virtual aspect of it, and Anna, maybe we can talk a little bit about the technical nature of this in the technical question round when we swing back around for everybody. But you shot it with a very interesting technique of VR.
A very complicated and tedious process, actually. Yes.
Cool. We'll talk about that when we come back around. But I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear Mia next, because I think Mia's work ties into a little bit of what Allyson is doing and a little bit what Anna was doing with your piece. Artifacts in Distress, is that correct? In Dystopia, Artifacts in Dystopia. So maybe you could take a few words.
Yeah, I would say I kind of took a similar route with Anna in terms of having nothing to do with really reality and kind of being super secluded to my computer screen, especially as a student. So I definitely had a pessimistic type of view in mind, in that it really is like kind of how I was seeing the future, which was very much living within the computer and screens, and almost trying to create like layers and perspective within technology. So it was a video of a video, and I initially presented it over Zoom in my class, which was about a fake Zoom class. So it just kind of like layered and layered and layered, and how I kind of used something very specific, like gardening tools, as now artifacts. Like in the future, we're not going to even know what gardening tools are, because we're very machine-based, very machine-oriented, and very much living in a virtual world versus manually picking up something like a gardening tool. So I found a very similar thing in terms of exploring that sort of virtual world and trying to create some sort of depth or perspective within that.
Thanks, Mia. I enjoyed thinking about your project in tandem with both Carey and Anna's piece and Allyson's piece, in that it was this, you were filtering us through the computer, but then when you watch the piece, you don't realize immediately that this is not present tense. And I think that is a very interesting switch that happened when I watched the video. And I'm sure when you presented it the first time over Zoom, that was another kind of bizarre experience. But watching the video, we're so used to seeing these screen conversations, and they are absolutely 100% present tense. So to then be jutted into what is a future narrative is really jarring, and it's good on the loop, because you kind of get interested in seeing what you missed the first time around when you weren't quite paying attention to what they were talking about, and why exactly we're examining shovels as antiques of a prior period of time. I'd love to hear from Ellie real quick about your piece, Planetarians, and I'd love to hear about the title. So it's Planetarian's Appendix, and this was the piece of the person trapped in what appears to be a box initially, but it's revealed throughout the loop that it's actually either a very large person or a very, very tiny room with a tiny door. And this person is just trying to just struggle to be comfortable in this space that's obviously too small for them. And again, it's the piece that we've used to do a lot of the promotion, because it's such a bizarre image of a person in a room too small, which I think is something that everybody's had to deal with.
Firstly, I think the way of I approached to experience a space would be a little bit different compared to others, I think, because actually I made a plan to make this piece before the pandemic. But you know what, it really, I think, matched to this time. Shortly, let me tell you about my inspiration about this piece. This work in this exhibition was triggered by an event when I visited a friend of mine before the pandemic, of course. I was curious about my friend's potted plant I encountered. The roots of the plant grew so vigorously that they came out of its container, its space. We eventually planned to do reporting the plant, and then when we pulled the plant out of its container, we were struck by the roots. There was no soil in the container, and the roots were violently tangled and bound. We cannot ask and hear from plants about what they feel in containers. But what I did was a kind of physical experiment on what we could feel in their shoes, their circumstances. You know what, while editing this piece, the pandemic happened to us. Then, while considering about the sounds of these images, I was in my room being stalked like a potted plant. Then I became very sensitive to a tiny sounds around me in my small room. Then I developed this piece with really sensitive sounds between the space and the physical movement in a tiny space. So I think this work, of course, was affected from the pandemic in terms of creating the sounds. And then many people asked me, did you develop this work as a response to the pandemic? But I want to let people think about this one. I just want to leave them to think what they can how can I say, interpret.
Yes, it feels, I mean, people have said that have come to see the show that it feels like they felt. There's just something to that metaphor that you nailed. Whether it was on purpose or not, you should celebrate that by accident you made a piece that just speaks to what's going on right now. And I think Alex, you did a very similar thing, and I have to assume that piece was started before the pandemic because it is so exhaustively technical in the way in which you put it together. But it still again creates, it's the piece that is on the reverse of the wall in the center of the space, and it also has sound that permeates the entirety of the space, and the sound is very aggressive, and so it's a piece that starts very quiet and grows to being almost unbearably aggressive and full of anxiety. And so it also, like Allison's piece, controls the mood of the experience of the viewer throughout the rest of the exhibition. And so there are times when it overtakes Allison's piece and overtakes Murmur, which is another sound piece kind of located in the corner. And as depending on the moment that you're in the space, it becomes too much. And I regret that our previous space, we built a small theater and would be able to put pieces in a secluded space that was separate from everything. And I have a hunch that your piece would have been one of the ones that went into that space so that people could experience it in solitude and move through the loop in a more passive cinematic experience. But the opportunity to have it really on a moment-to-moment basis change the affect of anybody that's in the space was kind of an interesting thing. And again, it's not something I don't know if I would ever do again, but I feel like it really is an experience. People will also just watch that entire loop leaned against the wall in awe of what happens, particularly when it makes the pacing switches in the middle of it. So I'd love to hear more about how much of that piece was pandemic related, how much you embraced the pandemic during the editing or during the shooting. So thanks, Alex.
Yep, thank you, Conrad. Yeah, the piece, just like you mentioned, the piece was started way before the pandemic. I started it in 2017. So when I finished my previous video piece, I started it immediately. And one of the criteria was that I wanted to work in a space that I didn't really know, and that there was nothing there. Like, I would like to work in a space where there wasn't really nothing there, let's say. But it's curious, and also listening to Ellie and the other artists here, that then there was this connection, let's say, in the end with the pandemic, in the sense of this relationship to time, let's say, because I feel that if the pandemic brought anything positive, it was this relationship to our own time, in comparison to, let's say, to our social time, let's say, so, or our group time. I don't know how to call it, but you can call it interesting because I was kind of in between my contract of work, of my job. So that kind of allowed me to go, and that was precisely when the pandemic started, like in March. So I was waiting for my contract to be renewed, and that allowed me to go back to Portugal, because I'm from Portugal, but I work in Luxembourg. So I think I just had a lot of months to myself and to finally conclude the film. And I definitely think that if there was something positive, let's say, it was this kind of inward look into ourselves, or this time that we are maybe not used to have to ourselves. So yeah, I think maybe there's a connection there with the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I think getting lost in something feels right, especially, again, it's to describe the piece a little bit further, it kind of starts with a visual landscape that you understand, and then degrades that over time. So it begins, like, I think when we walk through the video, it's just this spinning of architecture, but it's all shot in either an abandoned or an under construction concrete property. And it starts with kind of just these slow zooms into the architecture and back out. It's very, everything's very symmetrical, and then begins to start to kick camera and start to really twist things, and then begins to focus on details that are, again, the editing is really exceptional. It's a really wonderful piece. If you guys have any opportunity to see it in full, and it's a really good experience. But we kind of exploited that anxiety and allowed it to spill over into some other pieces, which feels pretty good. I think, let's see, who's not here. So Raji Jagadan's son, who's from Venice, Florida, who's not with us right now, produced the piece Plague, which plays to the right when you're facing proscenium, Allyson, and Jesse's piece. So, and it has a set of headphones, and it's film work that was shot in Venice, Italy, and then overrun with audio of, I believe it's the WHO in Europe, or NATO, World Health Organization, when they were not sure what was going on. And so it's these very sterile conversations, but then showing these kind of beautiful things. But again, it has that lonesomeness to the video quality as you're watching it, that the audio upsets and fills in certain gaps to the way it's been shot. It's a very kind of poetic piece. Sun Park has the piece Dysphoria, which is on a television monitor directly across from Alex's piece Grid, and kind of to the right of Ellie's piece, which again is a more of a digital disruption to our world through the pandemic experience. And then Christine Blanco, who may be joining us in a bit, has the piece where it's a video shot of furniture set up on the California coast that is burning. And the piece works its way backwards from it being entirely burned to reappearing. And so a lot of it's in reverse, parts of it are not, but it is, again, an exquisite poetic piece that feels right. It's kind of like this unexpected blur between nature and modernity, that when you're watching that piece again in comparison to some of these other pieces, feels like this violent disruption of our world. And then Stin Dimulinar and Jan Locus is a collaboration piece called Murmur, which was, it's largely a sound piece. When I did the video walkthrough, the more pertinent sounds were, it was It's more a silent part, unfortunately. But the piece is, they shot it in the swamp in Brussels, in a national park in Belgium. And it really is essentially a documentary film of sound work. And the sound work is being generated just by recording the heavy nature sounds as they disrupt as city life begins to wake up. And so, I think the piece kind of begins at something like 4 in the morning, and it's been edited to about 10 minutes, but it's really just this slow crossfade from heavy, beautiful, dense insects and wind and birds noises to the kind of, I think they refer to it as the urban growl, the kind of the dead noise of vehicles and human beings as a city wakes up. And it's a really poetic piece. Again, would have been better suited in a small theater. But like Alex's piece and Allison's piece begins to have a conversation where sometimes the nature noise begins to overtake the rest of the exhibition for a moment. And sometimes when you're watching that piece, Allison's voice or Alex's kind of heavy crunching growl, that your piece, when it reaches that crescendo of movement, begins to overtake the nature. And I hope Stin may join us. If they do, it'll be pretty interesting to hear what they have to say, because they were the ones that I was most nervous. They expressed immediate concern about being shown adjacent to other pieces. And eventually kind of said, I get what you're doing. I know that this is a gallery show. They sent a writer that described how they prefer to show it when they show it in film or in other installations. And they were like, please ignore everything except for the part that says it doesn't need to be too loud. It just needs to be full spectrum. And so that was kind of a bit of a relief. And again, I realized that what we're doing here with this exhibition is a little bizarre, because I think I'm also a practicing video artist. When we make works, we imagine them viewed in solitary, in perfect spaces with no echo and full attention. And what we're doing here is really disrupting that. And I appreciate every artist that ever participates in these. But the hope is that your work becomes a little something more when we produce these exhibitions, and that the relationships that happen generates an odd and new experience for the viewer to feel like they're in a curated universe of sound and image. And we get to do that every year, and it's my favorite show to put together here, and I hope it will be for a long time. So thank you for participating again. We've eaten through a chunk of this. I like to try to go to at least 12:15, if we can. I'm gonna bug the other folks about questions in a bit, but I'd love to just talk about some of the technical issues. So video is one of those things that a lot of us work in solitary while doing, and often there's resources that you need, particularly with filming and editing processes. And I was just wondering what working on this through the pandemic, how that affected your process. And I think I'm really interested in Gabriel and Carey's piece involving the sound, and then also Anna's piece involving using an AR, augmented reality system to actually generate the work. And then, so we'll kind of address that. And then also I'd love to swing around to Allyson and how, I wouldn't ask that you give away secrets, but I would love to know if that was a live performance that you captured, or if it was a heavily edited thing. So we'll swing around to that, but I'd love to hear from Carey and Gabriel first about the density of the sound work with that kind of playful video piece that you put together.
Sure. Well, let's see. I don't know. I guess like we've been doing a lot of sound work that's, I guess, more oriented towards field recordings. We incorporate a lot of field recordings in work that we had done previously, and like some amount of kind of sampling from field recordings and building up sound from that. But I think, I don't know, like, I guess we always like to do something a little different. So for this piece, we sort of wanted to move away from that.
Yeah, I don't know if we used any field recordings except
there's a little bit.
Okay.
There's a little bit of birds at the beginning.
Oh yeah.
But I guess sort of like in a way to stand in for that kind of textural element that you get with field recording, that, you know, there's a lot of sort of ambient noise and background in any field recording. And so to supply that texture, we ended up using a lot of recordings of his heartbeat that we took while Carey was pregnant. And I don't know, like we took some of those recordings and then like processed them through various effects and stuff to turn it into different types of sounds. And I don't know, just kind of expand the range of textures that we could get out of a heartbeat. I mean, I think we found that using the heartbeat is such an interesting, very like primal kind of sound.
It's not consistent. It's like we would try to match it with like other sound that we were composing. It just wouldn't really match because it's very irregular and it speeds up and slows down a lot. So it was something we weren't really expecting.
Yeah. But I think it's also just like, it's just that primal aspect of like of rhythm that it has is kind of immediately draws you in some way. But then to sort of like mess with that and turn it into like a weird synthesizer noise was very interesting for us. Yeah, I don't know. And then
what about like some of the animation like styles and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that we tried to do with this piece was to really approach the sound and the video separately, and like allow each of them to be their own thing until the end when they sort of met. So like
well, we would work on like we would work on the sound for like a few weeks, and then we would stop, and then we'd work on video for a few weeks, then we'd stop, and we kind of like see where they were kind of speaking to each other, or maybe where they were kind of diverging, and then like
yeah, I think we decided that we didn't want to like make a video and then like go back and soundtrack it, you know,
or the other
or
way
vice
around.
versa.
Yeah.
Which I don't know, I think we've taken either of those approaches in the past, but we wanted to sort of just move on both tracks
just
separately.
Make it harder for ourselves.
and just make it more ambiguous, like how they were even going to fit together. And then finally sort of figure it out near the end. So that was, I don't know, that was an interesting way to approach it.
Yeah, you guys are definitely developing a style. I mean, although we did this blind, I had a hunch about halfway through that it was you guys that made the piece. I mean, I think there's something to, again, you guys are tapping into a playful quality in both the sound and the image that is like almost more akin to, I mean, I don't even know where to put it. Like almost like an older music video. Like it just makes you feel a bit of joy in your participation. But again, the inclusion of the empty playgrounds and the way in which you have these objects on each piece as their active participants is so tragic. And it's going to be a really beautiful piece to have around 20 years from now to go back and be like, man, that was weird. Anna, so you kind of jumped into your piece of work with you know, this idea of solitude and chose to green screen yourself in all these different scenarios. Can you just talk a little bit about the insanity of that process by yourself?
Yeah, it was pretty wild. I also approached it similarly with creating sort of a separate soundtrack and video. So they kind of were growing individually, and then eventually I just tried to fit them together in a way that made sense. But the process of shooting, since I only had my living room essentially to work with, was fascinating. I created the set using augmented reality, and was pretty neat to it. So it was definitely learning as I go. And then I set up for some of the shots a green screen, and then essentially built out a room with quite a bit of depth using that program. So really ended up being maybe like 4, 5, 6, sometimes or more layers within space built around my TV set. I had this massive TV set at that place that I used to play the videos that I'd shot separately. So I would shoot the movie through the program that created the set layered on top of the video on the TV. So combining the virtual and the real. And it was so difficult. I think at some points I was using my skateboard to stop some of the jumping around from just holding the iPad in place, trying to move in and out of these spaces that I just made up. You know, I had layers of, on the TV screen in the background, I had static, for example. On top of that, I had a layer of television, which had a layer of couch and of a room and then of a building facade, and I would pull out. And I had, you know, telephone poles and wires with some objects hanging off of them. And then eventually through another window, and that's where your perspective was from. So I was trying to sort of slowly holding this iPad move through all of this space. So I was actually going through it as if it was there. And it was very, very difficult, and my skateboard came in handy, but you could probably still see the nice bounce of my cruiser as I'm backing up. Because we were in full lockdown at that point, and there was nowhere to go. I couldn't get any help. So super challenging, and I know iPad quality video, but I did what I could with it.
You have documentation of that. Is that public?
Yeah, it is. It is on the Festival of Impossible on Adobe.
Can you drop that in the chat, and then maybe we can drop it in the YouTube link so that people can take a look at it if they'd like?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, because it's hard to get a sense of what that even was without seeing it. If you were to watch it now, I think it looks just, you know, like I maybe used Premiere and stitched together a bunch of different special effects, but
yeah. No, I mean, well, I think that it plays with a level of I want to say electricity, but that's like the ad lib of the camera movement is in it, and it's something that's very difficult to do with anything other than your hands. I mean, you can't really do that with Premiere effectively to kind of generate a lot of that feeling of searching, of Steadicam, of looking, and I think it gives the piece the sense that you're actually a person looking at these things rather than a computer, rather than a filmmaker being told what to look like. And I think I think the way in which you shot it, I mean, that's something worth exploring, that you generate this feeling that is hard to generate when you're shooting things with film. I mean, with the camera and the crew. And
it was a really weird way to create a movie, essentially, out of nothing.
Yeah, it's great, and I think that goes for everybody. If anybody has any version, if you want to, if there's a short version of your piece or even the full one on Vimeo, feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll drop it in the YouTube if you're comfortable with that. So whatever you guys want to put, we'll try to link to and spread the word about, especially for people that can't get out, can't come see the show out here in Oakland. And I want to just now move to Allyson and Jesse's piece, and if you're willing to disclose or talk about how you assembled that, because the way the piece progresses is that you're watching what looks like a screen recording of a Mac desktop, and videos start playing, and you see the mouse choosing the videos to play and opening a new folder and playing videos in succession, playing them over each other, and it's orchestrated in which they're changing the sizes of videos and bringing some to the front and some to the back, all while this single video plays that's centered of Allyson kind of speaking this lecture poetry about the experience of video and the early pandemic experiences. And it's like, it's one of those, and everything happens just a hair too slow. And so you get caught up in watching one of the videos, and then you realize, oh, there's like a new video that's playing behind that's now driving your attention. And anyway, I'd love to hear about, I really hope that you guys just if you didn't just lie to me and say that you just rehearsed like 1,000 times and did it on the desktop in one shot.
Jesse's the main editor here, so I'll let him.
We really wanted it to kind of ride that line. We wanted it to feel like it could be a performance, but it's not. Sorry. but yeah, we've been talking about making something like a desktop documentary. I don't know if y'all know that sort of niche of documentary. And my kind of one critique of a lot of the ones that I had seen was that they all felt a little bit haphazard to me. Like, what was on the desktop? Why was it on there? There were like aspects of the intentionality that felt questionable to me. And so I really wanted to kind of, part of us working on this from my perspective was to really like push everything to a place where everything that happened was extremely intentional. And then that kind of went to this really intense place when we decided to animate the whole thing. And then the mouse movement became extremely intentional and and that feels almost like, is it even possible for a human to move the mouse in a way that is so slow and intentional? But yeah, I do feel like it like hovers hopefully kind of right on that line where you're not exactly sure.
Yeah, I hate to use the very overused word uncanny, but I do feel like it's probably the most apt descriptor here, in that, we really tried to kind of set up some rules for ourselves at the beginning of the video, right? And it's like, okay, well, in this video world, this is how the mouse moves, this is how the windows move, these are the things that, and have that aligned pretty strictly with sort of the rules of reality on one's laptop, and then kind of slowly break those, and so that like smooth movement of the mouse, and like, towards the end, the windows start to sort of move independently, right? And so to kind of take you to that place where it is breaking down. And I think a lot of it came from, Jesse's background is in filmmaking and editing and documentary. My background is in working in installation. And I think from the beginning, we were very much approaching the space as from this like question that we'd started with, which was, what would it be like to make a site-specific installation on a laptop that was kind of enclosed in that laptop space? And so that's where a lot of this came out of. And I think then the inclusion of the sort of references and clips to Man with a Movie Camera became important in thinking about the way that Vertov, creates these kind of illusions in space, and is really sort of manipulating the difference between the camera lens and our eyes, and, trying to see how we could, if not replicate those effects, kind of approach the movement of the windows and the videos within the laptop space in kind of a similar way, or a way that was inspired by sort of the things that Vertov seemed to be thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's the moment it becomes startling is when the windows start to grow and move around behind the video that's playing, and that is the giveaway. But it still makes you watch it again. I mean, I think a lot of people kind of want to keep spending time with it because it is so hard to fathom what's happening could be real. And it's, again, you are right on the line until it isn't. But I don't know. I mean, I found myself wondering, like, do they find a way to do that without bringing the video to the front? Anyway, well, I think that it's a really wonderful thing.
I'm flattered you think that we could be that graceful. So.
Excellent. Ellie, I'd love to hear about how that a world was constructed. Is that a composite, or is it a model with a very, very well-made tiny little door?
Please say again.
Did you do a visual effect composite, or did you actually make a small room that has a very, very small, accurate door?
Yes, I had kind of a staff to help me to build up a film setting. Then I did shooting by myself, then working with the sound designers. Yeah. Then Well, but you know what, there was not kind of really choreographical details because it was an experiment, as I mentioned. So I let my performer understand what plants can be in a tiny space. So she just had her experience by herself. Then,
It is wonderful, and it's, you know, it's a short, I think 3 or 4 minute loop. And when you watch it from the beginning, you don't realize what's happening. So it's shot with kind of closer, tighter shots of the face of the performer and their body as they're struggling to kind of get out of this small space. And then about a minute into it, it pulls back and reveals that it is a very large person in a very small room, or a very small room. And when we were discussing to put the image for promotion, I felt like it was almost a disservice to the piece to put the door in that image, because the door giveaway is really like a startling thing when you watch it for the first time. But because it's on a loop in our space, many people experience it without getting that, but many do. And so it's there's a lot of people that get to look at that work and see that struggle before they realize it's a struggle in a magical space, a fantastical space. And I think that's pretty exceptional that it plays, and it's very well constructed. Congratulations! It's a really gorgeous piece of work. And then I guess let's hear from Mia about kind of the way in which your piece plays. Like it is, you know, you used other performers, but as it unfolds, it begins with kind of an over the shoulder of somebody participating. I think they were like laying on their side, lazily watching the Zoom call. And then the Zoom call is revealed to be class, and then the class is revealed to be showing this documentation. And then it makes this really wonderful surrealist jump to the people filming the documentary about these ancient tools. And the director is a jerk, which is really amusing, and he treats his performers poorly because they'd have never used a shovel before, and he thinks that he knows best. And I think that there's some criticism there of education, but also filmmaking itself. And I wonder if you wanted to kind of talk about some of those choices.
Yeah, definitely. I think starting with the fake director, I think I've had experiences just as a student filmmaker with you know, people being kind of demanding. It's kind of that stereotypical like director who is demanding and like abusive to the actors. So I kind of wanted to play off of that. In terms of the education system, I had the video be kind of in terms of the educational video, I had it be kind of boring, and there's no sounds and everything's kind of slow-mo, and kind of having like a white screen for a description, because very much in my experience, unless I am holding something or learning by doing, you just don't get the same amount of education. And I kind of wanted that part to be boring, like many of the things I look at when studying. So yeah, I kind of played off of that as having it be, you know, slow motion, very simple, and then not much audio, actually no audio at all. And then kind of breaking that audio when you get back to kind of the reality of making the video and all of that. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And in terms of a technical conversation, I don't even know where to begin, Alex. Can you talk a little bit about maybe the rig that you used to capture those images? Was it a custom thing that you made? And then maybe talk a little bit about the sounds that you used and the design of that work and how that folded together. I mean, it's such a technical, marvelous piece that, I mean, again, it sucks everybody into it, especially people that are kind of into the experience. We have it on a short throw projector, so you can get about 6 feet away from it without putting your head into the image, and it fills your field of view and it is almost nauseating, especially the end. The moments when you're focusing on broken corners of concrete columns is absolutely stunning when you can stand with it. When you're watching an IMAX style here at Aggregate Space Gallery. But please, whatever you want to share, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Conrad. I didn't really build a rig, but I had very specific measurements on the floor. So the first thing that I did once I got to the building was just taking almost a mathematical approach to the building. So measuring everything, what's the distance here? How can the camera go from here to there? And how can that inform what I can do visually? So everything was measured. The movements into the water were a bit more improvised, but also measured. And that's kind of how it started. And it was a very long process, I would say. Even though I started by having this very detailed approach, then those, for example, the concrete that you were mentioning, or let's say even the water, was something that just kind of happened, let's say, because the first time that I went to the building was during spring, and it wasn't, I mean, of course it rains in Portugal during spring, but it wasn't really so wet has to create the big, let's say, pools of water that we see there. So it was only during winter that I started to find these new elements, these new natural elements playing into the building. And that was really wonderful for me, to have this sort of improvised or just unexpected moments there. And then the sound, I think the sound really started there with the water, because all of the sound that we listen in the film was made of sounds of the building itself. So being there, capturing especially the water, we start with this very repetitive water drop that we listen to from the beginning, and then it just gets more and more aggressive, more and more distorted, and there was a lot of natural elements playing into the sound: water, mud, air, let's say the wind. So I played a lot of that, and then so maybe field recordings, as you could say, and then I played a lot with granular synthesis. And that's kind of where I started to discover new sounds inside the sounds that the building offered me. And yeah, I just to comment on your choice, I really liked when you showed us this clip, that the video is against another wall, let's say, and it's a very narrow space. And I really think that, in a gallery context, I really think that really kind of enhances, let's say, the experience of the public, just not being able to move much to kind of experience the whole thing. So yeah, cheers.
Thank you. And I think at the end of when I was walking out of the space, you could see what happens when your piece really gets active, and how it lights the room. And so there'll be moments, particularly of the beginning of proscenium, where Allyson there's this single shot in the center of the image of Allyson speaking directly to the camera, and it's a very static, calm shot, and Allison's very focused and not moving, minus just her lips. And behind this wall is this explosion of swirling light, and it just upset. Like there's moments that just upset. Like every chance you have at feeling serene in this exhibition is eliminated. There's no moment where something doesn't give you a little bit of anxiety, it felt like the right choice right now. That's why we called it. This is where we are right now. But like just thinking about space and how things come together. I thank you all for making such like super exciting present tense work and applying to this. And I hope you tell your video friends to apply next year when we do it. Also, we have an animation call out. So every year we do a experimental animation festival, which is fairly open-ended, minus the fact that we separate it into narrative and non-narrative categories. But for the most part, we're just looking for anything shorter than 25 minutes that can be played in a loop and really help people understand that animation doesn't have to be character-driven, but can be narrative and can be fully experimental. So we're going to try to do that again this year in this lower space, assuming I can make some sound adjustments. I'm going to make one quick announcement would be that I'm going to do another one of these, I believe on, oh man, I got to check the date, hold on. Donald Fortescue is going to be our next exhibition, and on August 14th, we will have another Second Saturday Artist Talk, which I think because of his experience as a scientific experimenter and lecturer is going to swing a little bit more towards a presentation, and then maybe the second half of it will be the standard bullshit session, as I like to imagine it, that I have with artists in order to just kind of get to know who they are and let our audience know the realities of being an artist and the joys of making work and talking about it and getting excited about it, and the things with which our experiences in life affect the way in which we make new work and think about it. So again, I thank you all for chiming in on this and being a part of it. Does anybody have any questions? Liam, did anybody write any questions? No questions. Nobody chimed in. We're doing this under the radar today. That's fine. It'll be on the website for a very long time. People can watch it then. Does anybody have any questions for each other? Anna, you've seen the piece. You've seen the whole show a couple of times. You brought a bunch of friends.
Yeah,
did they have any? Do you remember them having any responses that are of note, or things that you might be interested in bugging people about?
Well, I do want to say, Ellie, I particularly liked your video. That one really stood out to me. It was so clean and beautifully done. So good work on that. I appreciated it. But I think the reaction was a little bit, like you said, of confusion and anxiety, because people are not used to seeing this many videos and this much changing light in the same space. So it was really unexpected, and it does create a certain feeling and a mood. So I think that was really effective. So good planning on that regard. But yeah, I think it was beautifully done. The new space is gorgeous. So I hope to come back for the closing party if that's happening.
That is absolutely happening, and we'll be here. And I don't know how it's going to work. We haven't had more than 5 people in here at a time. Like right now, there's 3 of us. We're all super vaccinated and
yeah,
confident in that. And
that's the way to do it.
After this ends, we're all going to put masks on and wait for strangers to come in until you have that awkward conversation. Are you guys vaccinated? Oh, good. We can take your masks. Yeah, Willis is going to pop in and say hi. So Willis has been behind the scenes.
Hi guys.
Hi.
Yeah.
We're super honored that you participated and trusted us to put your work up in the space. And thank you so much. And it's such a feat to have it made work during this pandemic. And just congratulations. And we can't wait to share beautiful documentation with you. And yeah, again, we're honored, and you're the reason why we're here.
Yeah.
So thank you.
I second that. And again, this is the first show we had in that new space. And so it was under construction like a week before we installed the work. And so the rolling walls are all new, and the paint is all new, and the half walls are all new. And I don't know how it works. I don't know how the space works yet. I know that I have to improve sound echo. And so it is more overwhelming than it should be in there. But I look forward to, I mean, again, you guys are the first, and I will forever associate your names and your pieces and your faces with the first thing that we got to do in this new space. So thank you all so much. And I will see everyone at the next second Saturday Artist Talk. Until then, I'm Conrad Meyers, Director, Aggregate Space Gallery, and love all you guys. Thank you so much for participating, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.